So I had started recording initially, and then ultimately had to plug up the little device here. I said I was just going to come immediately from watching the game, and then just still game attire ready, respectfully, and present my podcast today this way. And so, hey, you know who I am. Love is selflessly authentic, having all money, power, talent, opportunities now. Let me just come in and chime in. A couple of recaps for this week. We'll start with Patrick Mahomes, the $504 million deal that is basically going to keep him as a quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs from now until about 2033. I lost a couple of people today online as a result of some of my commentary, and it is what it is. Let's first talk about him being a 30-year-old quarterback who's now, as far as I'm concerned, past his time. Not prime, but time. A lot of people want to label everyone a GOAT. A GOAT is the greatest of all times. He's not going to be the greatest of all times. The way I assess it is a GOT. They're the greatest of their time. And there's no doubt that a gentleman like himself who's acquired 5 chips, he becomes the Stephon Curry, if you will, in more ways than one, of the NFL. And as a result, he's acquired 5 chips. And so there's no doubt he's going to be NFL Hall of Famer. But as it pertains to, do you invest $64 million per year in a 30-year-old player who has been bogged down recently by multiple injuries, to include but not limited to an ACL injury? How is that going to impact the game? When I think about the deal negotiated by the Kansas City Chiefs, I do think about off the blank, and I think about what he did with Kirk Cousins. Now, I know these guys are billionaires. They have money to play with. That's fine. But I like to look at it through a bigger lens than that, in terms of how do you build and rebuild a team. And I think instead of investing in Patrick Mahomes to stay with the Kansas City Chiefs, I think it would have been an opportunity for them to reserve their money in an effort to try and build a team, not necessarily around him. I think when you look at the core group around him, these gentlemen are aging, respectfully. And as they are aging, it is going to be a cost issue along the way when it comes to how do you secure the athletes. Now, I know, unlike Major League Baseball, who's right now possibly going to face a strike as they challenge issues like salaries, caps, the NFL and Major League Baseball have operate differently in that the NFL, like the NBA, they have salary caps, and they work a little differently to keep their players under the cap in terms of the team cap. So at $64 million per year for a quarterback who's 30 years old, I did say 30, right? Yeah, okay, he's 30 years old. 30 years old for the NFL is old. And I say that, again, with all due respect. By the time you're 30 in the NFL, it's like being 62 in corporate America. And so looking at it through that lens, how wise of a decision was it for them to invest that type of time, money, and resources? When they did it with Kelsey, we raised some concerns, but this deal that they've done now is really an investment in nostalgia. It's an investment in the past. It's an investment in a franchise player that you want to keep in Kansas. You want to be able to allow the people to come to watch him play. And I get that. Small town Kansas. But, you know, who's going to be your Wizard of Oz, right? Where's your Dorothy? You know, who's going to actually be able to click 2 or 3 times and make sure that that money goes further than you expect it to go? And so go to my timeline. You can kind of see that, or go to my LinkedIn page. I wrote an article on that as well. I'll be publishing another one for Filter Rim Sports in that vein. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out. A $64 million deal for a 30-year-old player who's bogged down with injuries, including an ACL. I don't think it was a wise investment at all. I think it is the equivalent of what Off the Blank did with Kirk Cousins. And I think by them holding and securing Patrick Mahomes at this point, I won't be surprised if they take a chance and trade him. Yeah, you know, I mean, look at what the Patriots did, right? You know, you can have a player, a top wide receiver, a quarterback, you know, safety, an OT that gets you to the Super Bowl, and you invest in them to hold them, to secure them, And then at that point, you own them, and you can do whatever you want to do with them. And we even see that in the NBA. We saw that with the Dallas Mavericks. Look what they ended up doing with Luka. No one would have thought in a million years that you would trade Luka, But it happens, right? And he was just like on the NBA side, respectfully, what Patrick Mahomes is on the NFL side. Luka sustained a lot of injuries. I remember covering him, I think it was 23, 24, and going into the series with him and Curry Irvin. And, I wrote, I did a show and an article called Inspirations and Injuries. And it was him, it was what he was dealing with at that time. So, speaking about the NBA, we know what happened tonight, 106 to 107. Let's talk about how we got there, how we started out the first quarter with literally, if I could use a term from football, running a blitz, right? Running a blitz on the New York Knicks, right? And what Wemby and Castle and Harper and Luke Cornett working the boards himself, and the rest of the team came off the bench and did. For the first half, we just knew a 29-point lead going into the second half was going to be easy breezy, that they were going to hold that. But at some point in time, we saw, and I say this respectfully, Wemby kind of fade. And I think a lot of it had to do after Robinson's flagrant foul. They got in his head. There's no doubt that they did. And I think that he also may have been concerned about suspension. And so what that might look like. We do recognize that if we look on the strategic side, there's no doubt in my mind that the neophytes of the San Antonio Spurs are the future dynasty of the NBA. They are going to be the future dynasty. I know we saw from 1999 to 2014 under the Parker, Duncan, and Robinson regime, if you will. We saw what happened there. But there's going to be something different with these guys. They have a couple of things working to their advantage. When I say neophyte, respectfully, if you're a sorority or fraternity guy or girl, you know the term neophyte. Those of us who cross the line, it's your first year or so, or your fresh meat. And so, respectfully, when we think about the San Antonio Spurs, they're neophytes. I mean, these guys, the average 19 to 21 years of age, 22 at best, and so outside of Cornett, respectfully, and one other player. But when you look at Bonds and Ingram and Fox and Wemby and Harper and Castle, they could let the New York Knicks take it if they wanted to, because there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to actually have the next 4 or 5 years that they will control it, just like Golden State Warriors did, and the Bulls and the Lakers. That is what is going to happen. This will be a one and done for the New York Knicks, if in fact they secure it, and they will. When you look at the fact that there was a loss this evening, what does that look like in the long run? It would mean that easily New York will grab one out of the next 3, right? That might be how that's done. And so if we're going to look at it through that lens, they have to pull 4 out of the 7. There's 3-1 series right now. The next 3 games, 5 San Antonio, 6 is New York, 7 back in San Antonio. And so, respectively, it may appear, depending upon what lens one looks at, that New York Knicks will be the official champions of the NBA. But, a couple of people blocked me, and I was a little surprised about one of them. He's from New York like I am. We're Bronxites, respectfully. There's a couple of them from the Bronx, the Rodney Strickland types. And so they blocked me, stating that, I had been impartial, and that, and I think the appropriate word should have been that I had been partial. No form of a bias, but I'm reporting. And so if I'm reporting or I'm giving my take on something, I'm not going to give a take through the lens of being a bona fide New Yorker. It's the same thing. I have conversations with Kenny Anderson. We love Kenny A. Spread out left rack, Queens. And it's the same conversation. What is expected of those of us who come from New York? In the space that I am in, I have to report what I see. And what I saw the first half was that the San Antonio Spurs served with the New York Knicks in the Garden, and my emphasis was on the Garden, and it is because what the Garden means to so many of us who are bona fides, right? And so to take that type of beat in the first half, yeah, I reported what I saw and what you saw, okay? And so if you gentlemen choose to block me, Mark, then I get it. That's fine. But to say to me, I thought you were a New Yorker before you started journalism, and you started reporting as if to suggest that that's somehow supposed to dictate how I report. No, I report what I see, and what I see is a future dynasty in the San Antonio Spurs. What I see is it should have been the Spurs against Cleveland. I'm not going to change that. And so their position is from day one, you have not really shown a lot of support or love for New York. I give New York what New York gave. New York swept Atlanta. They swept the 76ers, an injury-prone 76ers, a weak starting lineup and bench post Trae Young Atlanta Hawks. Okay, so you swept them. So to me, that didn't demonstrate what I saw the San Antonio Spurs do, go up against Shaq. Enough said. And OKC, talk about the Thunder, right? And Los Angeles Lakers with Luka, and Reeves and LeBron. Look at the talent pool and look at what they were able to do and bring about, and 7 consecutive back-to-back series. So they didn't get easy breezy's Atlanta 76ers and the opportunity, respectfully, to do a sweep. And so, but then one looks at tonight and you say, how did you lose a 29-point, margin? How did that dissipate? Offensively, it dissipated, but defensively, it got to a point where Brunson, but really Cat, I know Brunson got 36 points, okay? But I'm going to highlight how he got it. The likes of a Cat, Carl Anthony Towns played his tail off. I know up until halftime, everybody was saying he's a ghost. Nobody saw him. But at the end of the day, he made himself very, very visible, as did OG. To look at the clock at like 1.2, 1.5 seconds and know that Harper and Castle did not play D, was not posted up under the board, it's going to be something that is going to haunt them, because I have to say this, and I like to be careful with how I speak in terms of the athletes and their athleticism, and I say that because the game is a mental game too. So you want to be careful, especially when we're dealing with some of our younger players, neophytes, just entering the league. So you want to be careful when you say you lost the game, because it's a team effort. So there's no one who necessarily wins per se or loses per se, because it's a team effort. And in looking at the fact that it's a team effort, the team is accountable. But they are accountable for the fact that OG was able to get under the basket. It was his possession, okay? So he had the possession. So with him having the possession, even when Jalen decides to take a three, misses the bucket completely, at some point, no one is there to guard the basket. No one's there to rebound. No one's there to watch what's getting ready to happen, such that OG can come out of nowhere and rebound and make sure that ball gets in. I was speechless then, and I'm speechless now, because we released, if you look at what I released, the series is 2-2. Okay, back to San Antonio. Who would think in a matter of a second that it changed? Thank God I don't bet. Thank God I don't engage in sports betting. But for those who did and those who are, I don't know what's going to happen for you financially. I don't know where your odds were. But for those who watched the game or participated or was there, we saw what we saw. Who would think that with that limited amount of time that he would be able to take his own possession back and make something happen with it? And he did. And so I sent a post out that said, Brunson is the God, but read the other post. When I said the God, I'm not talking about the God and like a miracle happened. He scored 36, okay. I said a God is a point God. That what he did in this particular game, to me, is the first time that he's exhibited, the gift of a point guard. The grind, the hustle, the grit, I never saw that in him, respectively. I just haven't. I mean, I know you guys do, but, I just never seen it. But tonight, I think he played very well. And so I said, wow, he's a god. Like, he showed himself as a point guard. Is he the point guard that we're used to seeing? The Stephon Starbury types, the Rodney Strickland types, the Mark Jacksons, the Kenny Andersons. I'm a New Yorker, so I'm spoiled when it comes to point guards. And I know what a point guard is and what point guards do. And I didn't see that in Jalen. And I'm never going to lie and pretend that I do, even if they win the championship. But today, I say, wow, he exhibited himself as a god. For many people, they think 29 comeback, the first in NBA history. It was strategic. Was it? No, it was not. What OG did was not something that had been planned. It was OG doing what OG has been doing throughout the playoffs. And when I've been saying this, people have been telling me I've been giving him way too much credit. He revealed and showed himself true this evening as to why he deserves the credit in which he's been given. And again, Harper and Castle are going to be able to look at that video over and over again and ask themselves why they were not posted up. And I get it. At some point, they were guarding other people. And they were. But then there was a moment when they realized that Brunson missed the basket. And look at this. Look at, those split seconds, right? Okay. That they got comfortable too. Like, we got this. And it's in that moment OG comes out of nowhere. By the time OG comes back, you got Harper and Castle, they're bumping into each other under the board, right? It is what it is. But what does it mean in the end? Does it mean that San Antonio took an L? No. I disagree, respectfully. I say this over and over again. What we have seen in this series is the future dynasty of the NBA. It's a future dynasty of the NBA. There's something to be said about New York. New York City is a city of popularity because it's New York. It's a Frank Sinatra, New York. It's the Alicia Keys and Jay-Z's New York, respectively, right? So we're always going to be who we are. But at the end of the day, we will gravitate and show love and support for 53 years for a team that gave us nothing. It's their time, if at all. If at all, it would be their time. It would be their time. It would be the opportunity for Clyde Frazier, as we see him this evening, to have this beautiful smile upon his face, to be able to see in his lifetime that they did it again, right? They did it again 53 years after he did. And so there was a lot of people who thought it was going to be a 2-2 series. I was one, but only through the lens of 29 points at a half. And I watched it dwindle. I watched them play hard up against Wemby in the paint. I watched them control how he could work the perimeter. I watched them shut down their defense. And I just watched them get in the head of Wemby throughout the evening. And this is the problem you have, Commissioner Adam Silver, when there's so much emphasis in media sticks their nose in everyone else's business with regard to whether or not that incident that transpired in Game 3 was, in fact, a flagrant foul. And I don't think it was then. I don't think it is now. It's part of how you play the game. But y'all punished him, and y'all did it so verbal. Not you per se, but you indirectly, right? When you didn't do what you did with the Joe Ingrid and the Donovan Mitchell situation, right? To me, if it's not called on that day at that point in time, and this is something even through the plays but during the off season that they need to address. If you don't call the foul on the day of the game in that moment, you guys don't get to come back and look at a videotape under the pressure of media or a couple of selected few and now say we missed something. That's a dangerous thing to do, Commissioner. It's a really, really dangerous thing to do. If your referees who have been officiating games, who have the skill set like a Foster, and the like, and these gentlemen have been trained in that space, if they don't call it on that day, I think it's almost unconscionable for anyone to be able to request that you do some retroactive flagrant foul or you position the athlete during the next game to punishment. where he's under the watchful eye of referees for any and everything that he does. And it reminds me of the days when Allen Iverson played, the hand check situation, and how the referees kind of were in cahoots one with each other, like AI's playing tonight. And they come in with these prejudgments as regard to how they're going to actually officiate the game. You want to be careful about doing that. And, right now it looked like it works to the benefit of the New York Knicks. You all were able to manage to get in Wemby's head. You were able to shut down the team offensively and defensively. And, okay, you win. But I want to say this. When people start asking me, and these DMs I'm getting, and the people that blocked me, particularly those of you from New York, at the end of the day, okay, New York will win. Because you all are fans, you don't see it through the lens that I see it. And when you've done this the way I do it, I don't allow myself to get personally engaged. I just don't. To me, they're all as good as their last performance. You'll be the champion today, and then the season starts by September, October, and then we're looking for a new champion, right? Everyone's as good as his or her last performance. And so I don't allow myself to get so emotionally attached to this in that regard. I respect the craft. I respect the game. But I don't sit around as the fan. And I'm not being arrogant. And I don't think anyone else should. That is the one thing that happens in these sports. Maybe we might need to consider, whether or not we think of it through the lens of the league holding a championship for 2 years, as opposed to maybe every year. And I think that's what happens. You become as good as your last performance, just like Patrick Mahomes, and you are able to see the goodness of what they're doing. And then within about 16 weeks or less, we're already preparing who's going to be the next champion for the 2027 year. We know based on the seeding roulette that it would appear that the Cleveland Cavaliers will be the Eastern Conference champion if it goes the way the seeding roulette would go. And so, roulette, right? So if not, it is who it is. And so I say this to those who listen and follow. Don't get so personal, where you start shutting people down and you start trolling people and becoming rude and disrespectful. Understand what we do on this end, or what I'm trying to do on my end. And I'm not trying to get so personally involved that I become the fan. That's a dangerous place to be. And we used to see that a lot with the Shaquille O'Neals and the Kenny Smiths and the Charles Barkley. And most of you all had issues with that. That these guys were too personally engaged in terms of how they presented. And that, therefore, was evidence of partiality and impartialities, right? What I'm doing is I give you hardcore facts. If there's a 29-point lead, there's a 29-point lead. But what do you do with that now? And how do we look at it going forward? I think the best thing that you can do, absent a miracle, is just congratulate the New York Knicks on being the NBA's 2026 champions. No, I won't allow myself to do that. What I'm going to do is what I've always done, and that's just allow the games to be played out. But if you were a betting person and you know that there's 3 games and you know that they're only winning by 1 point, then I would be careful to presume that they're going to go back down to San Antonio and that they're going to win there. I would be mindful of that. I also want to recognize San Antonio Spurs for exactly what I just pointed out. New York Knicks has only been able to win by 1 point. Imagine that. Okay, we're talking about them being able to blow everybody out. 13-game winning streak was lost to the San Antonio Spurs. They haven't been able to beat the San Antonio Spurs by 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 points like they were the other teams leading up to this point. So there's something to be said about what may or may not happen over the next 3 games. We don't know. But what we can do is continue to watch and be mindful and hope that the next 2 to 3 days, they have about 4 days off, that their bodies will be able to rest, mind, body, soul, and spirit, and that Wemby will be able to look at what he could have done differently. And because you can't just accept the good with the good, and you have to be able to be willing to sit back and say, okay, what could we have done differently? And what did they do differently as a whole? Because again, it's not just one person. But once they got in Wemby's head, you can tell that it impacted the team as a whole, even those coming off the bench, including Fox, And so, what do you do with that? What do you do with a 1.5 seconds left and you're so comfortable? Or do they even know it's 1.5 seconds left, right? They're so caught up in the heat of the game, so they don't necessarily realize in that moment that there's a second left. So when they let their guards down, literally and figuratively speaking, OG was able to come in and do what OG's been doing all year long, saving the New York Knicks. Okay, so I wanted to just chime in today. Wrong Ball the Allen Iverson way. I know that Tribeca Film Festival is proceeding from this week, and so a lot of people are excited about that. I do know that a lot of people have been asking, what are you going to be doing with Wrong Ball? We're still moving forward with Wrong Ball. I said this then and I say it now. Wrong Ball is different than what Allen Iverson's documentary produced. And I know that they tapped into some of the things that I had already put out there. And it is what it is. But no one is going to be able to touch Wrong Ball. Trust you me. And I'm glad that they had the opportunity, Curry, O'Neal, 1-9, to do what they decided to do in my absence, respectfully. But nevertheless, what I have is not scripted. It's uncut, unedited, it's raw, it's real, it's relevant. It covers 50, 60 years. A 15-year-old mother who at less than 2 years outside of Roe v. Wade, the right to have an abortion, a 15-year-old girl decides that she's going to give birth to a child. So when a mother makes a choice, all this pro-choice, pro-life, but when a 15-year-old girl makes a choice to have a child and that child becomes a future Hall of Famer, there's something to be said about that, right? So we're going to talk about different things on that level. What was the 1970s like? What was the choice of a mother? Pro-life, pro-choice, the right to have a child. Especially now when we look at that the Supreme Court of the United States has repealed a woman's right to have an abortion in many jurisdictions throughout the United States. And so each state, however, has been able, absent what we call federalism, to be able to make decisions for their prospective states. And with that being said, what noun and who noun gives birth to the future Allen Iverson? What issues are teenage girls dealing with now that Allen Iverson's mother Ann did not or could not or would not have faced then? And so we'll examine that. Title IX, 1970s, and now we look at 30 years in the NBA. We'll talk about women's sport. We're going to talk about what Pearl Moore, a conversation people don't want to have. She is the highest scoring woman in NCAA history out of Francis, Marion Francis University, but they don't give her credit for that, right? Because now they want to concern themselves with the level of competition that they had back then versus now. But I wouldn't have in that conference the level of competition she had back then, right? So we'll talk about the direction of women's sport and what are we doing about agenda versus gender, and what is the real agenda of pushing the gender in women's sports. And so we're going to be having those conversations. We'll talk about the hip-hop culture. We're going to talk about human trafficking too. And, everybody will hype on AI going into the strip clubs. They didn't touch base on that. But I am, right? Because there's something to be said about what was happening back then. Big Meech is back on deck now. He's home. He was doing what he was doing back then. And y'all remember Allen Iverson during his 2016 NBA Hall of Fame speech, giving a shout out to Anthony Wolf Jones. Anthony Wolf Jones was shot and killed, and it involved, at the time, Demetrius Edward Flannery, aka Big Meech. So we're going to be able to talk about all of that, right? And more and more and more. Hip-hop culture like it's never been. We're going to take Allen Iverson's life through those particular social movements, but we're going to do that without the NFL. How you doing, NFL? I know you listening, because that's what Allen Iverson truly wanted. So we'll talk about how injustices can impact one's future. And I know most people are thinking about, well, he did well as a Hall of Famer for basketball, but his heart, his soul was in football. And so there are few that had the opportunities that he had, where a circumstance could turn around and work out to his favor like it did for him. And so we'll talk about those. You have everything from the Hampton 4 to the Central Park 5, to Jenner 6, to the Bronx 6. And we're going to talk about all of that. But we're going to conclude this conversation about the New York Knicks. All right, we're out. Thank you for joining me today on Filter Room. This is Lisa Hampton. Love is selflessly authentic. Having all money, power, talent, opportunities now. And I know you mad at me, baby boy, from the boogie down. But it's okay. We still good, aren't we? You can block me or you won't. It's fine with me. All of y'all. We out in New York.